Greetings, happy coders, and welcome back to another video. It's been a while. I'm still coding away on Scramble and getting ready for the Crash event, which I'll be attending in November alongside some of my pals, and looking forward to meeting some of you guys as well, seeing some of you again, meeting some of you for the first time as well, I hope. So, yeah. And some of you probably know about this project that I've been working on that's been keeping me away from Scramble, which is this thing that you can see here. This is our first Midnight Brew Special collection, which is the Frankenstein and Dracula 40th anniversary collection. And it's not really a plug. Well, it is a plug, but what I'd like to do actually, though, is just talk a little bit about the background and what's gone into it and why it's, for us, it's been a little bit different to just publishing the games. You know, we didn't want to just republish some old games and not really add much. So we thought we'd see what we could do and come up with a plan, and it kind of evolved and took on a life of its own, much like the monster himself, right? So yeah. So as you can see here, this is the box set that we are working on, right? And there's another quick flash of an image there. We'll come back to that in a minute. But this is the box set, and it started out probably about 6 months ago, I guess. And there's a guy called Mark Harrison who I didn't know especially well at the time. We've become quite friendly since. And he said, "Oh, I'm working with Colin Stewart. There's this game, Dr. Acula, which I had seen had come out, which was the much long-awaited sequel to the original game Frankenstein, right? So that came out in 1984, and this was almost 39 years later, 40 years later, really. And he said Colin and I were thinking we might like to do it with you guys with Midnight Brew because we really like what you do. And I said, well, let's see if we're going to do that. We don't really publish individual titles, but perhaps there's some scope here. And the conversation quickly turned to the fact that Colin had also recoded from the ground up the game Frankenstein as Frankenstein Rebooted 12 or 13 years ago. And that had also never been released on tape. So we had these two games that had never been released on tape. And obviously, 2024, the 40th anniversary was coming up. And I said, well, let's talk about this and let's think about doing a box set, a 40th anniversary box set, because that would really tie in with what we like to do as a publisher, to do things that are a little different, a little bit special. And so that's where that evolved, really. And so very quickly then, I mean, in fact, we had been talking about doing this. I'm quite friendly with Bob Hamilton, and we were thinking about doing something with his games as well. So it wasn't absolutely the first time we'd considered this, but this was the first time when everything really came together, and we could see that we had a clear sort of timeline, and we thought we could take our time with this. Let's get it right. This is the first one. We can, learn as we go, and aim for a kind of Halloween launch, if you like, right? Like a Halloween soft launch, maybe, where we'll get the boxes out to people who've ordered them, and then also we can have it available at Crash. And Colin was planning to come to Crash, so obviously that would be great. We could have this whole connection as well between the old and the new, right? Sort of the homebrew coder from 1984, kind of hooking up with some of the guys from today who are still active today, and working together to kind of embrace that sort of punk ethos, that sort of do-it-yourself attitude that I always love about the Spectrum and about coding on the Spectrum and the tradition of that. It's such a wonderful tradition. So it's great to celebrate that, and sort of look at it as a historical, culturally interesting document, at least within the community. So yeah, and then I started chatting with Andy, and we initially we came up with a first design for the box, which looked like this. And this is a little bit bigger than the final box that we did. And I'll explain the reasons for that in a minute. But this was the plan, and the idea was we would like to have a box which was stylish and obviously and compact, but also flexible, right? So we could have 2 tapes or possibly 3 in a box with a theme, right? So most commonly that theme would be a particular author or perhaps a particular character, or and so on, right? And then we would expand it and add additional things to it, right? Within the box itself. But the initial design, as you can see, that's kind of what it looked like. Now, the final result, the one that we've ordered, is slightly different to this. This was a design. We had a kind of prototype made, and we sent it off to some manufacturers in China, and then we got some quotes back. And logistically, though, we didn't feel confident that we were going to definitely get everything that we needed on time. So in the end, we decided to go with the suppliers, the manufacturers that we'd used before for our previous collections, because we had a good relationship with them, and we felt like, you know, a little bit of loyalty is always a good thing as well, isn't it? So yeah, it meant that the overall cost of producing it was a little bit more, but you know, the vibe was better. I think we could put it that way. So yeah, that was the decision. But in doing so, we couldn't have the writing on the side. But to get over that, what we've done is added a sleeve. So there's a sleeve with the writing, and then you basically slide that off and then open the box and so on, right? And that's something that started to evolve as well, because what we wanted to do with the box and the package is have this idea that there would be stages of unboxing, right? And so that things would appear one at a time, right? So you'd start with the package, then you would have the logo, then you would slide that off, and then you would open the box, and then there would be extras that would come with that, right? And that's kind of what we did. So then I said, well, let's take a look at the reviews. Perhaps there's some artwork to be found, and we found this artwork here, which was in Crash magazine, right? So, and this is all we had to work with, right? This is Oliver Frey, obviously. And I got in touch with Chris Wilkins, who I'm also quite friendly with, and said, I don't suppose you happen to have this artwork, do you? And he said, no, unfortunately, I don't. I think Ollie gave it away at some point. So it might be out there somewhere, but I've no idea. You'll have to work with what you've got. So that is all we've got there. That's all we had to work with, which is literally just a scan of the magazine. Now, Mark, who I mentioned earlier, is also he also works in graphic design, and he was able to kind of rebuild the picture a little bit in terms of, you see the lines and the creases that you've got there. And then another friend of mine, Dom Reardon, who's a professional comic book artist, quite a well-established one, in fact, and also a huge Specky fan. And I contacted him and asked him if he would be interested in redrawing the missing parts, right? And he said he'd love to do it. More than happy. Big fan of Oliver Frey. Happy to sort of to do that, and in a way kind of collaborate with one of his heroes in a way. Obviously, Ollie sadly no longer with us, but still a legacy and still a chance to kind of bring some of his work to life and sort of restore it, if you like, right? So yeah, so Mark did that, and then Dom redrew the parts in the style of Ollie, and obviously we got Chris Wilkins' permission to do that, and he's going to have some posters of this available as well. And then, as you can see, this is the end result here, and I think you'll agree that it came out really, really nicely, right? So we're going to be using that. That's part of the box set. So that'll be a postcard. We're going to have an Oliver Frey art postcard in there featuring this. And it then turned out that there was a competition in Crash, and there was a second Oliver Frey piece of work, which was this one. And this was a competition in issue 10 of Crash. And as you can see, again, that's all we had to work with. We didn't have the original, but this time the restoration was a little simpler because it's just the edges and that sort of crease line, and Mark was able to remove that. And we were able to, again, restore the image back to its kind of original glory, if you like. So as you can see, there you go. And it's that's more vibrant, higher resolution, and so on. That's the wonders of modern technology. And then the nice thing is this was used as a competition for Crash, and it turned out that the issue of Crash, issue 10 of Crash, was in November 1984, and we're just coming up. So that November issue would have come out around about now, October, but in 84, 40 years ago. And so I spoke to the guys at Crash and asked them if they'd be interested in running the competition. And so that's a kind of wonderful connection as well. They're going to run the same competition 40 years later, exactly 40 years later. And there'll be the chance to win the box set for you guys. So keep an eye out for that. So that was a really nice touch. And this will be an Oliver Frey postcard, double-sided, right? So you'll be able to see both of those, and that will be part of the collection as well, right? So that was one thing. And then we also moved on to talk about this. So what this is I spoke to Colin and I said, do you, I don't suppose you happen to have any of your old original design documents, thinking that he wouldn't, but it turned out that he still had the graph paper that he used back then to design the graphics, right? So this will be an A4 graph paper showing the original designs as they were done in those days, right? So nowadays, very few of us that code games, like myself, would design the graphics on graph paper. I mean, I have had a little tinker with that. It's quite useful to do that when you're traveling. If you don't have access to a computer or something, you can have a little dabble with pixel art like that, but generally not. So this is a nice way to give you an insight into the design process as well, right? So what we didn't want to do was we wanted to kind of avoid the sort of dreaded sort of tat label, right? Some people say these games, oh, you just get a load of tat and whatever. What we wanted to do was kind of make it into something that was more of a document, right? So we would have the games, and we would also have some of the ephemera, let's call it that, right? The sort of things that were connected to the game, the design, as I said, the Oliver Frey artwork that was used in the competition and in the review. So it's a wonderful sort of insight into the design process of a teenage bedroom coder in 1984, right? So that's a kind of connection, and we've got two of those. So that'll be a double-sided. That's that one for the graphics, and then there's another one here, which is it's relatively simplistic, but again, it shows you the process. This is what Colin was doing, designing the levels and planning the routes that the player would have to do. So it was a lot more physical in those days. Everything nowadays, when I'm designing games or recreating them, I'm doing everything on the laptop pretty much. There's no, as I said, not really pen and paper stuff for me, but in those days, very different, right? And that's a nice contrast. So that will also be included in the pack, and it's, as I said, a nice historical reference. And moving on from that, we've also included the original advert. This is for Frankenstein, which was originally released by PSS, as some of you will know. And the nice thing about this is it also describes the game and gives you a little bit of there's a poem there as well. There's a few other bits and pieces. So again, that just links it in, doesn't it? So we covered the reviews and the competition, and this is more like the publishing company at the time, what they were doing and the approach that they took. And then I believe we've also, on the flip side of that, we've got, I don't think I have it here, but Mark has also recreated a similar advert in a similar style to this that appeared 40 years later, because of that was Dr. Acula in Crash 40 years later. So this one is the 1984 advert, and on the flip side, there is a 2024 advert for the sequel. So, which, as we said, was never actually released at the time. So that was the reason for that. Again, a nice touch, a nice way to give you an insight into the contrast between the two. So then also you saw the original cover, and I can just flip back, right? So this is the cover that we'll be using. I'll give you a close-up on this shortly, but if I just jump back here 1 second. Yeah, so you can see these covers are the Midnight Brew style covers, the sort of black and the simple logo. That's the way that we like to work. But these ones are going to have reversible 1984 covers as well, right? So you've got a sort of 2024 cover, which is the Midnight Brew one, which is the modern homebrew, and then contrasting to that, we have a copy of the original artwork and the original PSS cassette cover, if you like, and that's on the inside. So if you're really old school and you want it to be that way, then you can flip it, right? And I believe this isn't actually the image that we used in the end. I think it says Frankenstein rebooted, so it's a Frankenstein rebooted style. It's done in the style of 1984, right? And then there's a similar one for Dracula, which Mark made as well, and that's on the inside too. Additionally, on the actual Frankenstein tape, after the first game, we also have the original game, right? But it's been bug fixed. So there was a couple of bugs in the original when it was released. This is the definitive version of the original, if you like, right? That's on the tape after the Frankenstein rebooted, if you like. So there's a copy of that on there for posterity, and that's never been released on tape before either. So there are actually 3 games included. So that's pretty cool. And then let's move on. Here you can see the cover. That's the original cover. You can see people that were involved here as well. And the same goes for Frankenstein. So we've got the green and we've got the red. And yeah, so that's really the collection, I think. Is that everything? I think that might be it. Yeah. Okay, so I'll be back shortly. I'll do another video soon where I'll be playing the games, because additionally, not only have we done all of this nice, fancy, arty stuff here, as you can see there, you'll see that there's a credit there. There's a guy called Lee B, who's a really talented musician on the Spectrum scene at the moment. He's done a lot of great work, and he's done some tremendous new music for both of the games to really enhance the atmosphere for 1 to 8K models, and it really brings the games to life. And obviously, I mean, the games are great already. I mean, I actually think personally that they are certainly Frankenstein the original. I think it's a little bit of an overlooked game. It's a game that I think is, you know, in my opinion at least, as good as a game like Manic Miner. It's a little more strategic. I think some people didn't absolutely get what it was about initially, because it takes a little time to understand the tactics and the strategies that are involved. But once you get that, I think it's a fantastic game of its time. Perhaps arrived a little bit late, you know, being in 1984. There was a huge number of amazing games that came out in 1984. So perhaps it was overshadowed. But when you compare it to other games which were coded by a single person in their bedroom, you know, as this one was, a teenage coder, I think it stands up very well indeed, and is absolutely well worth a play. And you'll be seeing that on my channel. I'll give you a preview of that in the next video. Okay, so I think that's about it. I've been waffling on for 20 minutes, and those of you that are still here, then thank you for sticking around. I hope that that you found that interesting. And before I go, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody that has been involved in this, the people I've mentioned and others, obviously my friend Andy and Mark, and of course Colin and Lee and everyone else that's helped. It was a tricky and challenging project because we'd never done it before, but like all of these things, it was a wonderful experience, working with people, overcoming different problems, identifying the things, and designing and working and being creative. And for me, that's really what this hobby has always been about. That whole kind of do-it-yourself ethic and the spirit of homebrew, which clearly I hope still lives on to this day in us. So yeah, all right, guys. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you again hopefully soon with another video and some more stuff about Scramble too. And in the meantime, as always, happy coding. Bye bye.